What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? If my ex were still in love with me, I wouldn't be married to you. Oh, my God. I still think about it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. It keeps me up at night sometimes. This was never out and out said to me, but over the course of my marriage it became pretty obvious, and yeah, it hurt like hell. I'll never stop suspecting the relationship was just a chess move to provoke jealousy. Oh, trust me, there's more, but I'm not gonna put my husband, even though he's anonymous, on blast like that on Reddit. My sister's boyfriend at the time told me he thought he might have fallen for the wrong sister. Doesn't compare to most of these, but my sister is my best friend, and I was so scared he might ruin that. Edit, since a lot of people have asked, no, I never told my sister about it. Another edit, they broke up very shortly after this, because he was untrustworthy in other ways. He stole some money, she kicked him to the curb. Sounds like that shit was already ruined, lol. Neither of us ever mentioned it to her, but yeah, they broke up not long after for other trust issues. Namely, he was stealing from her. Not a great dude. Edit, my sister and I are fine, closer than ever. I have a friend whose grandmother married her late husband's friend. One day while drunk he confessed to killing her first husband. She packed up the kids and left. A lady I used to with married an old boyfriend after she divorced her first husband. One of the triggers for that divorce was that her husband's personality changed after he was involved in a serious accident. He was trying to fix his truck on the side of the road when it was rear-ended and crushed him. Not life-threatening injuries, but a lifetime of pain. Years later, in a drunken conversation, second husband started talking about an accident he was involved in. He'd lied to the police about the circumstances, so basically got a slap on the wrist and was kind of bragging about how lucky he was. Yeah, turned out he'd been the driver who hit her first husband's truck. Divorce number 2 came soon after that revelation. A buddy I met in college had a complete emotional breakdown one night when we were in our mid-20s and told me he had hit a cyclist when he was a teenager and left the scene and was sure the old man had died. His brother said he had been suffering through his mistake for years, and this accident had truly and completely ruined his life. He had no way of knowing, but my uncle, elderly and mentally ill, was killed on his bicycle by a hit-and-run motorist at that intersection during the time my friend would have been in high school. Pretty sure my uncle's killer just confessed to me. Did you ever confront your friend about this? Did they get sent to jail, or did you think he suffered enough? It was a family decision to not turn him in. As bad as it was for us, we could see that karma was in play, and our justice system was unnecessary. Did you ever tell your friend that he probably killed your uncle? No. Some things are just better left unsaid. A friend of mine died from a drug overdose. After the funeral, a mutual friend of ours and I were getting drunk when he broke down crying. He asked me if I remembered the time when he and our dead friend told me about an accident that they'd witnessed where they saw a truck driver die. I told him I did. He then told me the most messed up shit. He said that our friend ran up to the dying man and stole his wedding ring, and that the man couldn't do anything but look up, terrified, at our friend as he was being robbed. I knew they were bad into drugs, but I never thought they could do anything like that. I grew up with them, they were like my brothers. I don't really trust anyone completely anymore. No drugs or alcohol involved, but I have somewhat of a similar story. A few years ago, my mom witnessed an accident. A lady was texting, blew through a red light, and T-boned a truck with an elderly man driving. My mom jumped out of her car and held onto him while waiting for an ambulance. The girl who hit him, early 20s, was freaking out and called her mom. The mom showed up first and kept telling my mom, just tell the cops he ran the red light, no one will know. And he died. My mom heard his last words, sounds, really, that she repeated for weeks. My mom cried for days. She met the family, and it was the man and his wife's anniversary, or something like that. We obviously told the cops the truth, but we don't know any of the follow-up. His obituary is framed on our wall. I hate to think the last thing he heard was just tell the cops this was his fault. She told me she poisoned her abusive ex. There is a small, but non-zero, chance that my great-aunt killed my great-uncle. He was an alcoholic who died of pneumonia, age 37, in the summertime. The doctors chalked it up to the alcoholism. But his daughters had a vague suspicion that their mother might have A, slipped something in his drinks to make him sick, or B, known he was sick and decided not to call a doctor until it was too late. It's also very possible, and in my mind likely, that he was sick and didn't think he could afford a doctor and she just didn't have the energy to fight him on it. Once at a college party, this big guy got upset, picked up the table and threw it across the room, shouting my uncle molested me. Everyone was terrified, but we all felt really bad for the guy. Dag. Fingers crossed somebody there helped him into therapy. That statement will stop any party dead in its tracks, and honestly for his sake it's good that it did. Yeah, it was heartbreaking when he started to break down and cry after realizing what had just happened. Needless to say, the party was over. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out that same day and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother since I had no siblings, and he confessed to beating the shit out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born, but my twin brother died in the womb. At the time my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good, so he claimed to doctors that she just fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay. I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life. I was in Peru hanging out at an art show pretty late. One of the guys I was talking to was this 17-year-old bloke from Hamburg, Germany. We were all pretty knackered. I asked him what he was doing in Peru. I was there to do research for a book. He told me that he was in hiding and had to leave Germany. A year ago he was participating in a protest and they were throwing rocks at the riot police. He was being handed rocks to throw and was just chucking them. Then someone handed him a lit Molotov, and when he threw it, it went into a police car and burned 2 police officers alive. He said as penance for what he had done, he decided to dedicate the remainder of his life to learning to become a shaman/medicine man and to help others. His story still sticks in my mind. As penance for what he'd done, he chose a punishment that plenty of people choose freely and that he can walk away from at any time. I'm gonna say that doesn't count. Penance would mean turning himself in. That they witnessed a mugging/stabbing outside of a bar, and did nothing but watch the person bleed on the sidewalk. I asked why they didn't call 911 and the excuse was that they knew the stabbing and didn't want to snitch. Bystander effect, it's possible to just freeze up out of shock. The first shooting I witnessed, I drove a half hour back to my apartment, sat down, and stared at a wall for God knows how long before thinking to call the police. By then who knows what the had already happened. The second, yep, more than one, I just pulled into a parking lot a block over and made the call. A funny old drunk in my town used to come in and chat with me at the ice cream parlor I worked at. He was a very kind old man who liked to joke around, and he was always very appropriate to me and the other teens who worked there, just lonely I guess. One day I was asking him if he was ever married and he got tears in his eyes and said I lost her, she died with a baby, and that's when everything went bad. And then left. Me and the other girl working just sobbed, it was so sad. God damn it. Poor dude. Good on you for listening to the guy. It was a pleasure, he was a lovely person. I had a girl, who I had only met maybe a couple times before, confess to me that she purposely stopped taking the pill so she would get pregnant and trap her boyfriend into a relationship with her since she stumbled upon some texts with a friend of his that he was planning on leaving. The kid at that point was already a year or 2 old, and they were engaged with the wedding coming up shortly. I didn't know either of them to really say anything. So I told my mutual friend about it that night before I left. The dude ended up thinking my friend was coming on to him somehow, even though she was there with her significant other, so she promptly left the party and the couple got married and divorced eventually. I had a beautiful girlfriend who I was in love with get really drunk and tell me that she wished I were more handsome. That I was ugly, but that if I were more handsome, I'd be perfect. For what it's worth, I am not a bad-looking guy, although I've never considered myself attractive. I prefer never to offend anyone, although I am generally known to be quick with a comeback when I feel offended. But that hurt my feelings so badly that I couldn't think of anything to say and just wanted to cry. The real question is, why was my self-esteem so low that I would put up with that? I was generally bruised and battered by life and didn't think I deserved better. Anyway, it was weighing on my mind, so a couple of weeks later I brought up what she'd said. She said she didn't really mean it, but I knew she did. In vino, veritas and all that. So I said what I wished I'd said at the time. I told her I could understand where she was coming from, and I would also like to be more handsome, but she needed to keep one thing in mind. If I were any more handsome than I am, I would never, ever, 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 ever have settled for you. She looked like she had been slapped. She lived in Cuba and I lived in Costa Rica, and we spent about 6 months a year together, a month on, a month off, etc. A year or so later, I called her from Costa Rica as per usual on Mondays when I wasn't in Havana with her, and she told me to call her again on Friday, that she had a big surprise for me. Though she was going to tell me that she had managed to arrange for a passport and was going to finally be moving to Costa Rica to be with me. When I called on Friday, her mother answered the phone. She was very fond of me. I had kept GF's grandmother alive for almost 3 years, sending medicines monthly that she couldn't get in Cuba, and every time I went there my suitcases looked like a disaster relief shipment. Her mother could hardly speak. She passed the phone to her husband. He took a deep breath and told me that the day before, she'd taken the money from the sale of a house I'd bought in Havana for us and ran off with her boyfriend to South America. So that was the surprise. Just gratuitous cruelty. That was very tough for me. But years later, I'm actually glad not to have that toxic parasite in my life anymore. Last I heard of her, she is not so young anymore. 42 and pretending she's 30. Fat and ridiculous in the sequined mini dresses that used to look ravishing on her. Losing her looks, and trying to make it as a truly shitty singer in low-rent hotel lounges in ratty areas of Miami. Okay, not much of a story, but I was glad to get it off of my chest. People, don't put up with people who say hurtful things. It brings out the worst in you, and more important, people who say hurtful things will also do really shitty things. Night before his wedding day. I'm still in love with, but I'm still gonna marry F tomorrow because it's too late now. My cousin left his bride to be on her wedding day. My guess is that he's probably really embarrassed about it, because he's pretty sensitive, but I've always respected him for the sense he showed that day. Imagine how embarrassed the ditched bride must have felt. I'm sure she did. However, she got all the sympathy that day. There's more to the story than I've explained. In short, my family is Mormon, and due to the culture, their engagement was short. There was no cohabitation, or other commonly accepted practices that happen for many other couples to get to know one another, and a great deal of pressure to find the one and get on with life. For my cousin it was his last chance to make the right choice. Whether or not it was right, he wisely recognized that. When he was 11, my dad was abducted and raped by 3 men. He was so terrified that he never told his parents. After my grandpa passed away, my dad finally told my grandma what happened. She told him that they already knew. One of my dad's siblings knew and had told grandpa. She just said that he had taken care of it. A few years later, a developer bought my grandparents' farm and turned it into a development. During excavation they found 3 male skeletons buried in a single grave. I guess grandpa really did take care of it. Rangers really do lead the way. My mom was in another state for business. A company flew her crew out to Texas to discuss a change in software and offer their company, and so it was just my dad taking care of me. I was about 10 and he came to tuck me in one night, but he is incredibly hammered. He opened the door to my bedroom, told me I was a mistake that saved them from getting divorced and good night. Worst part is he didn't close the door completely when he left. At a family gathering my grandma got tipsy and started to tell stories from her childhood. While she does this every time, no matter tipsy or sober, guess it's just a normal grandma thing. This time it took a dark turn. She told us a story that is the reason she hates to go to the dentist and particularly hates the drilling part. She told us a story about when she was 6 years old. During World War II my family lived in Hamburg, Germany, right next to the harbor. During a particular week in 1943 the city was continuously bombed and over 35,000 people died and more than 100,000 people were injured. The houses that were hit mostly burned down, creating a huge fire, with such force that I sucked not only oxygen in, creating strong winds, but also people. The fire created such heat that people running out of their burning houses got stuck in the molten asphalt on the streets and burned to death. As it was all happening around her, that particular smell was present for over a week in her part of the city. Drilling in your tooth creates exactly that smell. My grandma had to stop the dentist, as she recognized the smell immediately. This story shook us to the core, as it came out of the blue. It still sends chills down my spine. For anybody who wants to read more about it, Operation Gomorrah edit, r/World War Histories if anyone wants to share their parent/grandparent story. My story can't compare with yours in significance, and it has nothing to do with drinking. But my mother always hated driving over a particular bridge, one that had a metal mesh as the roadbed. The sound the tires make is very particular. We used to tease her about it for years. One day she had enough, and told us why. When she was a wave in World War II, she went out to party with some sailors. One of them had a car with running boards, and one more sailor wanted to come along, one the other guys didn't like. They told him to ride on the running board and hang on. When they went over a bridge with a similar roadbed, They hit the gas, and the extra sailor fell off and was run over. She was still carrying the guilt 40 years later. I overheard a murder confession. I was at a resort in New England with my family. I went onto the balcony to smoke. I could hear people talking somewhere above and to my right. They were very drunk. The man said he was going crazy with guilt. He shot someone over a drug deal and he drives by the memorial all the time. I couldn't tell which unit the people were in. The man had no discernible accent. He never mentioned a city name or anything. No details at all. I really wish I could have helped solve a murder. Police officer. Arrived at a stabbing call as a backup unit and ended up transporting the suspect back to cells. He was extremely drunk/high. He started talking semi-coherently in the back seat of my police car and I was mostly ignoring him. At one point he said something like, "And this isn't even the first time I've done this, she was so young." And then he started bawling. I flipped on my recorder surreptitiously to see if he would say any more, but he didn't. He just cried and cried. Intox confessions are generally useless anyway, and once he sobered up and spoke to his lawyer, he denied having any knowledge. I talked to our major crimes guys but don't think they did anything with it. I still wonder though, it wasn't bravado, that's for sure. I had a male friend tell me he had SA'd me once when I was passed out drunk. I'm a straight male and had been friends with this guy for 15 years and had been drunk with him a lot. Since then I have found out a lot of messed up stuff about him. I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Growing up gay in a small town, I was the only gay person I knew for most of my life up until adulthood. I get sick with guilt when I read stories like yours because of how inappropriate and pushy I was with a straight friend when I was a teenager, but I never would have assaulted him like that or touched him period without his consent. It's just that he was kind of all I had. It's hard to accept no gracefully when you're young and lonely. Maybe I'm just rationalizing what a dick I was. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm making what happened to you about me somehow. I hope you're okay. Life is just so goddamn fucked up sometimes. Thank you, I'm doing great and I've dealt with it. I have no bad feelings toward anyone and I've learned to understand people and why they do what they do. I have never let this affect my love and support for the LGBT community. I have too. I had a housemate in college, who several years prior, had accidentally shot and killed a friend of his in a hunting accident. He went to trial, and was acquitted of all charges. Years later, he didn't tell me, but he told a woman I was intimate with, that it wasn't an accident. Years ago, when I worked at the Las Vegas Hilton, in the main kitchen, I had a very high-strung boss named Hussein. He was from Turkey. We jokingly referred to him as insane, because of his personality. Once, after our shift was over, he grabbed a case of beer from the supply walk-in refrigerator, and invited a few of us to help ourselves. He probably had 4 or 5 himself. He then proceeded to tell us that when he lived in Turkey, he had kicked some guy's ass and came to the US to get away. My coworkers and I really didn't give it too much thought. About a month later, we came to find out that while on vacation in Mexico, Hussein had been walking back to his hotel room after drinking at a bar. He had ducked down an alley to take a piss, and was caught by a policeman. He was charged and convicted of public urination. At least at the time, the US didn't have reciprocity with Turkey, but Mexico did. Well, it turns out that what Hussein had described as kicking someone's ass, turned out to be murder. He was taken back to Turkey, where we assumed that he spent the rest of his life in a Turkish prison. The movie The Midnight Express portrays what life is like there. My roommate confessed that he stole my identity, opened up credit cards in my name, and has been dating a guy but isn't gay because the guy is really a girl. This was way before trans was remotely accepted or thought of, and the guy hadn't done anything resembling transitioning. That was a fun night. I moved out the next morning. I lost a lot of money on that fiasco and ended up being sent to collections because he paid his rent from my bank account, and when I recovered it they came after me instead of him. Had to also pay $1,100 to break the lease. What a story. It's funny now. At the time I was scared. I had a blackout drunk dude telling me all this and had nowhere to go. I locked my door, barely slept, and got out of my house first thing in the morning before his drunk self was up. One of my best friends since middle school opened up to me the day we had our last day of high school. We had been partying all day, got off at 10 a.m., but most people left at around 3 p.m. to go get ready for the seniors' dinner and after party and whatnot. My friend stayed behind with our class president. I told him I'd pick him up for the dinner and left. When I got back, both were falling down drunk and in tears. A few years earlier, our class prey had lost his father. I take my buddy back to his house so he can get changed for the dinner, and on the way he tells me what happened. They had kept drinking when everyone left and eventually got to the topic of their dads. I had never met my friend's dad. He died and that was all I knew. I never knew how he died. It turns out my buddy's dad was a lawyer or something in the country he's from and was being extorted by a gang. When money started to run out, my buddy's dad sent the family to another country and told them he'd meet them there, that he had to finish some things up. A few weeks after moving they learned that he had been murdered by the gang. It completely fucked my friend up. We always used to drink heavily and whatever since we were in high school. For me it was just drinking, for my buddy it was numbing the pain. It was fucking shocking when he told me this, and really made me understand him a lot more, why he acted how he acted. Had a buddy tell me his friend drunkenly confessed to him that he had killed his stepdad and made it look like a suicide. His stepdad had been abusive towards him and his mom for years and it finally broke when he made it look like his stepfather had hung himself in their garage. I don't know who the friend was, I was never given a name or much else of the story. The second year after I graduated from high school, all of us in the graduating class, 22 total, went on a camping trip. One of the dudes got really drunk and we were just catching up when he confessed that to the whole class. That he killed his mom's BF. He was always come and go anyway, he was a truck driver, would regularly cheat and spend the night/week with that woman. Rinse. Washington repeat. Him being MIA, was no cause for alarm. He also was abusive towards his mother. He has gotten into fights, pulling him off his mom. We all just looked at each other, the dude who was sitting closest to him just patted him on the back and we passed him the joint. I don't think anyone has brought it up since. That my mom and dad's relationship will always mean more than what they could ever hold for us and that part of her wished it was one of us that died instead of him and if she could make that happen she would. That is not true though. Grief makes people sick in really weird ways. I am so sorry that you are going through and dealing with this. Thankfully I am old enough to understand that and though it hurt it didn't break me, that was a year or so ago. I've presently moved a few hours away and am doing a lot better and able to manage relationships in regards to this as I can tell in a phone call if Therese any drinking happening. She has never been a nice lady when drunk and the death just pushed it into overdrive and he wasn't there to stop the intake beforehand. Thank you for your kind words. When I was 14 my mom took me and my sisters and a couple of our friends to the beach. My sister, 15, and I got our own room with our two friends and wound up meeting some boys and getting drunk. My sister's friend, 15, was really drunk and got super upset and confessed that her stepfather had been sexually molesting her for years. Really horrible stuff. It sobered everyone up fast. We rallied around her, told her we were there for her, yada yada, but when we got home from the beach trip a few days later I knew I needed to tell my mom. After I told my mom she got the state police involved, there was a trial, and the man wound up sentenced to 8 years in prison. It turned out he was doing it to the younger sister as well. There are so many terrible people out there, I'm really glad that at such a young age all of you handled it so well and helped her out. I'm sure she really appreciated it. Shared an off-campus apartment with a very cool older guy in college. He was a nurse. Got up super early every morning to do his shifts. Every night you could find him at his regular Irish pub. They let me drink there without ID because they knew I was with him. Basically a super high-functioning alcoholic. One day I came home after finishing my exams. He brings out a bottle of Jameson to celebrate. It was about 2/3 full. After a few shots he starts telling me about his time in Vietnam. I'd known him for 2 years and he had never brought it up, and I had never asked. I knew he was a vet, but assumed he had been a nurse. Nope. Special forces, I'm not military and I'm sure I got some of the actual military stuff wrong, as you shall come to understand. His demeanor totally changed after a few drinks. He started telling me about having to go on covert operations to carry out assassinations of civilians. Said he dreams of the faces of all the people he killed. We ended up polishing off the entire bottle. He got up the next morning at 5 a.m. and went off to work. I spent the entire day moaning in bed and praying to the porcelain god. We never spoke about it again. Edit, I believe he was part of Operation Phoenix. I remember reading up on it after that night. One day, my dad went to a bar by himself, got shit-faced, and tried to ride his motorcycle home. He crashed it into our neighbor's mailbox, destroying both the bike and his knee. As I was treating his wound, he confessed about how he had been cheating on my mom with a coworker over the last few months, and he was drinking out of depression because the coworker quit her job and ghosted him after she got him to spend thousands on buying her expensive gifts. He then cried his eyes out, and this was my first time ever seeing him shed a single tear in my life. I was only like 16 to 17 at the time. It was a lot to take in. Not really a confession, but more of something no one ever told me. One time I was watching a movie with my mom and she had had a few drinks. She wasn't wasted, but she was more talkative. Something in the movie made her talk about her life leading up to now. Apparently, a year or two before I was born, she was pregnant and suffered a miscarriage because the pharmacist gave her the wrong medicine and they told her she probably wouldn't have children again. This was the first time in 17 years I had ever heard anything about this, so it came to a complete shock to me. My awesome boss at the time, who didn't say much about his life, confessed to me that his marriage wasn't something he wanted and that he's only staying in it for the love of his 2 young daughters. It was heartbreaking. Trust me, staying together for the kids may seem like it's the right idea, but it's not. Even at a young age I could pick up on how much my parents didn't like each other. I grew up in a house of hate. Only when they finally separated was I truly happy. What it's done to me is now I can't handle the slightest dip in a relationship. Instead of sticking around and trying to work things out, I end things and move on. I saw how much it hurt my parents and I won't make the same mistake. Haha, I put Adderall in your beer. We're gonna party till the sun comes up, bro. Spiking people's drinks is so scummy. Is there any more to this story? At one point he whipped out a knife and put a hole in the surprisingly thin bathroom wall of the dive bar. Shithead carved his name above it. I had a massive mood swing and got in a really nasty parking lot fight. I woke up with dried blood on my knuckles, heart beating out of my chest, and paralyzing anxiety. The guy was like the Kenny Banya of our friend group. Always spastic and obnoxious, and taking things past the point of being entertaining. No one ever wanted to hang out with him one-on-one. I thought I was being a good guy by giving him a shot. This effectively got him ostracized from our friend group. My girlfriend at the time confessed that she only started dating me because I'm a relatively big guy, and she basically used me for protection after being sexually assaulted about a month before we met. I knew about the assault but not that aspect, although it explained a lot of the problems in our relationship. What happened was we made out at a party, word got around, and overnight any guy that knew us stopped hitting on her. From that point on she decided that fake dating me was worth feeling safe. On one hand I totally get it and I'm glad that in some twisted way I was able to help her get over that trauma, but it did hurt like hell realizing the girl I fell in love with effectively saw me as a bodyguard. Found out not long after that she regularly flirted with other guys behind my back, knowing that they would never actually pursue her because of me, and a few times later in the relationship she actually did cheat on me. Fell into a deep depression and couldn't tell anybody why, because that story getting out would have crushed her well beyond being an appropriate retaliation. This will most likely get lost, but here it goes. When I moved to the current city I live in, I found a roommate on Craigslist. It was 2011, so not as weird as it would be today, and he was really cool. He lived in a double master house, so I had a lot of privacy. He was a young real estate agent, and we ended up hanging out in each other's social circles. Well, we'll call him M. Ended up catching feelings for this girl that became pretty close to me. When the feelings weren't reciprocated he started getting weird and almost resentful towards me, but I digress. Over time I found out that M had a drinking problem. I would get home from work around 1 a.m. and it wasn't uncommon he would be passed out on the couch after finishing off one of those cheap-ass liter bottles of wine. One night I get home a little early and I notice him sitting with his back against the couch in the total dark. I ask him if he's okay, in which I can immediately tell he's emotionally distressed. With the drunk wine next to him, he begins telling me that when he first moved to the city he caught his girlfriend in bed with another guy and shot and killed him. His girlfriend fled the state, and because it was in a shifty part of town police never paid it much attention, so he got away with it and he thinks about it all the time. I gracefully made my exit upstairs, freaking TF out. When I saw him the next morning he asked me what time I got home from work because he didn't hear me come in, meaning he has no recollection of telling me he murdered someone. I had my dad help move me out the next week and I never mentioned it to him. It didn't go unanswered, but I was made privy of it before the guy ended up getting arrested. I knew a fellow in high school that had gotten mixed up into one really bad decision. He kinda poured it out one day while we were skipping class. He came in drunk and visibly panicked. Him and some friends had gotten into an altercation with this guy at an apartment complex in the early morning. After some drinking, they had got into a fight, but since it was him and 2 other guys this other guy had started shit with, it was a 3v1 situation. As anyone who's experienced the real world knows, you really shouldn't mix alcohol and street fighting. The 3 of them ended up killing this guy. I think it was a matter of during the brawl the guy fell down some concrete stairs and cracked his head open. At least that's how he told me it. I would later find out it was so much worse. And this fella was lying his ass off. Regardless, the 3 quite obviously panicked and realized they'd seriously fucked up. So they proceeded to dismember the poor bastard in their garage. I wasn't given grisly details, all I know is they cut the guy up, stuffed the body parts in trash bags, and the plan was to dump them into the river. I don't know exactly how they were caught, if they turned themselves in or what. All I know is that later that day we returned to school and 2 police officers came down to the cafeteria to pick the guy up. Legitimately never saw the guy again. The guy I'm talking about swore he was only an accessory, but when the details finally came out, he was lying about a lot of things. For starters, the guy killed was mentally ill, and it wasn't a case of a 3v1 fight. In fact, there were only 2 of them. I don't think there was much of a fight to begin with. They straight up murdered this guy. Stabbed him to death, actually. Finding out the truth later really messed me up. This guy was always super chill, very calm and collected. A very nice guy. He was a black belt in the Kwon Do, and we'd spar a lot. I was heavily into martial arts as a whole back then and always trying to learn more, which is actually how I met the guy, so I knew the guy could fight, and when his original story came out, it made sense that he could kill a guy in a fist fight if he was under the influence and not holding back. Honestly, it's one of the most fucked up things anyone I personally knew has done. And that's saying something in my life. Apparently the guy tried to repel his case 4 years later to the court, and it was denied. There's plenty of news reports about all this, but the details are all over the place between them. I lived in a small town where shit like this just didn't happen. There was some gang activities, but no heinous murders like this. My ex told me that he had been molested by his sister between the ages of 6 to 11. She was 9 to 14. His dad walked in once and didn't do anything. His own family knew that he was being sexually abused for years and did absolutely nothing to protect him. I'm afraid it's likely that the sister was being molested by the father. She was the mom's daughter from another marriage and her first husband had molested her. My ex's dad was the second husband and no, he didn't touch her. He just didn't care that she touched his son. My grandfather grew up in the sticks of Texas. One time he casually brought up that I shouldn't ever wear pants with cotton lining them. Apparently his best friend burned alive in front of him because his pants caught fire and they couldn't get it out or the pants off in time. Never mentioned anything about it before or after. I found out one of my friends killed a guy. He's from a South American country and his parents are high up in the military. He found out some guy in town raped his cousin and SA'd his sister. He found the guy, kidnapped him, brought him into his home and tied him up. My friend's dad caught wind of it and told him, "Do what you need to do, I'll take care of the aftermath. You guys can figure out what happened after." I had a boyfriend who never talked about his past ever. He talked so fondly of his old state but just about the actual state, never about people. If you tried to prod further he would just say, "Oh well, it doesn't matter anymore." We were young, I was about 19 and he was probably like 23 or so. He drank a shit ton all the time and whatever, we were young, so I just thought that it was normal and all in good fun. One night while shit-faced he started talking about how much he loved going into the woods and how he and his friends enjoyed playing on the rivers and streams in his old state. Then he got very sad and started to babble a bit incoherently. I heard him say something along the lines of his friend came to his house on meth and they were all also on drugs. Then more incoherently babble, then something about his friend getting shot in the face. Then more incoherent babbling, then something about that is why he can never go home again. He was so desperately sad and missed his home very much. You could tell every time the topic came up. So yeah, I am pretty sure he accidentally, or on purpose, killed a guy and was on the run. I have my money on accident because he seems so distraught, but you never know. Also, you barely know anyone or anything at 19 years old. I often wonder if he ever had to face those demons. My best friend disappeared for a while, presumably left town. We were both in our mid-20s. He came back after a month or so and he'd take me out every night drinking and partying. I wondered how he was able to blow so much money on drugs and alcohol, but he wouldn't tell me. I saw him pay our tab one night and he must have had 12 or 15 grand on him. After coming back to town he basically stayed inebriated at all times and wanted to hang out with me whenever he could. He'd come over to my place after closing the bars down and we'd often keep partying until morning. He would usually end up breaking down and crying to me about how he can't live with himself over what he did. He wouldn't give details. Night after night this would happen until he broke down again one night and told me he was paid a lot of money to do some bad things to bad people. He confessed that he was paid by someone in his dad's gang to burn someone's business down over a money dispute. Then he told me he killed a couple of guys who were thought to be molesting children. He said he was given a handgun and a shotgun and was paid $10,000 after each man was executed. More than 10 years later I still don't know if I believe him or not. After he came back he was so fucked up and depressed. If he was telling the truth it would make sense. He kept doing drugs and drinking until about 5 years ago when he had a heart attack at age 27. He quit using drugs and alcohol but the damage was done. He suffered another heart attack 6 months later and died a few days after his 28th birthday. He was the funniest and kindest person that I've known and I miss him.